Hi, everyone. I'm Sean. I'm going to skip my introduction because I think you care more about what I have to show than my background, which I would love to talk to if you are interested in that. One thing I do want to say forth is, hold on, get started. Cool. This is going to be interactive, so interrupt me at any time if you have a question, if you have a comment. This is gonna be very few slides. It's gonna be pretty much all demo. There is going to be a surprise at the end where we're going to do a little bit of a choose your own adventure. I know there's some people who are really advanced, so I want to make sure that you're seeing something that maybe you haven't seen before. I would love if you have your cameras on. I could see all of you right now on my other monitor, and all of your cameras are off. So you don't have to, but if I could see you, I hope that it'll just make it easier for me to understand how well things are being processed. My goal is to hold your attention for 45 minutes. So we're going to move fairly quickly here. To get started, to prove how interactive this is, I need to know kind of your general Power Automate skills. So if you could self-rank. So in the chat, please do me this favor. Put a 4 if you're really good at it. All right? Put a 4. Put a 3 if you're really good at it. But you have imposter syndrome, and because of the 21st century, you don't want to put a 4. And then give me a 2 if you've done some stuff with it. And then give me a 1 if you're kind of fairly brand new. Sweet. Okay. We have a fairly high level here. Great, great. So we'll blow through some of the more beginner stuff. All right. I'm going to talk about different ways to speed up and optimize Power Automate flows. Sure, you can debug faster. Sure, you're going to prevent bottlenecks. Sure, you're going to use less request counts because remember, there's a limit to the day. My main goal is you go home earlier because all your stuff finishes running. That's my goal for you here. All right, first one, a little background on what I'm going to show you is this demo involves an outdoor adventures company. They have a bunch of outdoor activities and they have instructors who teach them. But we do not want people who aren't certified anymore teaching activities. So if Nick is your scuba diving instructor, you would hope he's still certified. So how do we solve this actual problem? What we have here is this Power Automate flow. And what it does on a really, really high level is that it gets a list of instructors from here. And I'll show you what that actually looks like. This is all coming from Dataverse. And so we have a bunch of instructors. There's their name, there's their SQL ID, there's their age, and blah, 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 blah. All right? So I am taking these instructors and I am passing them into a child flow right here. All right? It gets a list of instructors. And then what I'm doing is I'm checking their university status and their license status. So is Nick and all of the instructors in my system, are they still certified? All right, here's actually our first opportunity for optimization. Right now, we're doing this. We're checking the university status, we're checking the license status. It doesn't really matter what order these go in. Who wants to bravely raise their hand and really fast say, oh, I know an obvious way to simplify this. Not more code. What's an easy way we could do this in 3 seconds and maybe even save ourselves 3 seconds? Anyone want to volunteer? I know half of you know. Sam,
just do a parallel call.
Sorry?
Run both those calls. If they don't need to be sequential, just run them both in parallel.
Beautiful, man. So exactly like that, you could just do a parallel branch, like he's saying, drag this up here. We don't need this anymore. And then at the very end, we click into the one that comes next. So this one is coming next. We hop over here into settings. And then under select actions, we're going to choose the other one. And then we're done. Beautiful. Sam just saved us 3 seconds. Thank you. Next thing that we're doing is when we go down here, we are doing a loop. We're looping over all the instructors and we are setting their status. How are we doing that? We have this compose. I will zoom in case this isn't big enough. The compose looks like this. It's all right, here's the name, here's the years of the company, credential status, cool, cool, cool. I'm going to append this to a variable. So at the end, what this looks like is, here's us doing an example create, where it's all right, here's the name, here's the years of the company, here's their license. And then at the very end here, it looks like that. We have a bunch of variables. Actually, no, let me show you the final result. So it looks like this. Like that. Cool. So we got a bunch of people in here. They're all licensed. Very nice. How do we, again, we're not trying to use more code yet. How do I just make this go faster? Like, what's the way? Right now, we're going one at a time. Does anybody have a suggestion for how to make this loop run quicker? I know some of you know it. Don't be afraid. Someone's putting it in the chat, I bet. And then I know Heidi's smiling. She's like, dude, that was like Power Automate tip number 4 from 6 years ago. Concurrency, thank you, Neil. You're my friend today. If we go under settings, we turn on concurrency control, and we turn this all the way up to, if you can see that, I'm turning it all the way up to 49. I save that. Great. Now it's running so much faster. Cool. We're going to talk about why that's actually going to cause problems later, but for now, it's lovely. All right, so I have that. It's running at 49. However, if you use concurrency, you'll notice if you only have like 10 records, it barely really goes faster. So you really only see the benefits once you get past like 20 or so. All right, so that's great. That's pretty good. But here's the thing, and this is something just that's a coding principle in general. If you have loops, they are a caution sign. Almost always, when you see a loop, it's an opportunity that you should be careful because there's probably a more optimal way to do it. Loops take a long time. So let's look back here, and this is for my slightly more advanced for Power Automate people. Rather than doing a loop, if my data, this is the end result I want, how can I recreate, instead of adding to a variable, how can I do something like this using a different action? Is there a Power Automate action that lets me take my source data and recreate this without going through a loop? Thank you, Nick. What do you got?
Is there like a map thing? Like you can take the source data and just map it through?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Does anyone remember the name of that actual action? There he is. Thanks, Neil. Neil, do you want to just teach this for me? So in here, exactly, he's talking about a select. So there's also problems with that too. We're going to come into that. So I come in here and I type in select, and then there it is. I'm going to select that. I choose my source, and then I do the mapping as Nick said. However, because it's kind of like a cooking show and I want to use your time well, I'm not going to go do the whole thing for you. I have it right here. So this is what he's saying to do. You choose your source and then you retype these and then you're good. So if you don't believe that the select is faster, I will show you. If we look at a previous run, what we have here is this took about 4 seconds to run. The select took 0 seconds to run. All right. Now, there is a danger with this, and I will show you. So I have name, age, years. This is all great. Let's hop into here. And in our final result, I don't want to use that variable anymore. In fact, that for loop is useless to us now. So I'm going to come into here, and I will choose the, I'll have to zoom out a little. Cool. Faster than a loop. I'm going to save that. Now that is going to be our output. All right. Now we're going to get into a different concept. This is a software concept called the open-close principle. I'll show you what that means here. It's easier with an example. So let's pretend we have 2 people working on it. Let's say we have Matthew and Nico. Nico built this flow here. Robert is working on other things. He's working on the flow that is consuming, that's using this flow. So this is all Nico here. And then up here, the actual parent flow is all Matthew. All right. So Matthew just took some instructors, passed it to Nico's flow. Nico gave Matthew back those instructors with their credentials. And so down here, what we have is that he's going to send some emails saying there are a total of this many invalid instructors. The first instructor's name is whatever. So let's, I think I have a run of that here, don't I? Yeah, let me resubmit this. So we're going to run this. So Nico just finished his work, and he's like, Matthew, it's good. Go have fun. You can use it. I built it for you. So let's go in here and see what just happened. So he ran this flows check. We passed in all of these instructors. And at the very, very end of all this, what Nico is returning is, oh, there's their licenses. That is super convenient. Very well done. And then if we go down here, what we have is an email where it says, here are all the invalid instructors. The first instructor's name is this. So Matthew loves Nico's work. But Matthew decides, hey, you know what? I don't want to just show the instructor's name. I want to show their age. The instructor's name is blah, 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 and their age is, paste that here. Let's edit this. So if I have to zoom out a little bit, it's TOT age, and we should be good. Let's save that. Let's see, because if you remember from earlier, we have the instructor's age and all their information. So in theory, this should work fine. So if I rerun this, before I rerun this, I'm very curious. Give me a thumbs up if you think this is going to work, because it should work. I mean, look, right here, we have our instructors, and there's their age right there. There's their first name. All right, I'm going to rerun this. Give me a thumbs up if you think this is going to work. And then give me a clap, or apparently you could do a thumbs down. Give me a clap or a thumbs down if you think it will fail. All right, I'm going to run this, and because it's a demo, it's probably going to take 40 minutes. So you have some time to give me your vote. All right. Let's see if this worked. Oh, it failed. Who can tell me why this failed? This is strange. Now Nico is getting yelled at. By the way, Nico, you do phenomenal work, so this would never happen to you. Why did this fail? Who wants to raise their hand and tell me? All right. I know Neil is probably sitting there like, you know what? I'm kind of tired of answering all the questions. So Childful did not include age. Thank you, Rachel. Yes, that's exactly what happened here. And this gets into a very important principle. Yeah, age is missing, like Rachel said. This gets into a very important concept. That is, we can apply to low code that's taken from pro code. So if we go here, and where is it? The open close principle. So the open close principle basically says objects are open for extension, closed for, who cares the technicalities? The main message of it is don't remove properties and be very careful modifying existing ones. If someone gives you, let's say, let's choose different people. If Heidi and I went grocery shopping together, you know what friends do, and I asked Heidi to go, I had headphones and a red pen in my shopping cart, and I'm like, hey, Heidi, take the shopping cart and go buy a purple pen. If Heidi comes back to me with a purple pen, headphones, and no red pen, I'd say, what did you just do? Why are things gone? I gave you a shopping cart. Bring me all the same stuff back. That's what that means. So in this case, what I am absolutely not trying to teach you is that select is super important here. You should always use select. No, that's not my point. My point here is you need to be aware of if you're modifying objects. But we can get around this. So how we solve this very common problem. And by the way, this is the things that, like, especially when your flows get more enterprise level and they depend on each other, you do not want to be changing and creating new objects of the same thing. So does anyone know how we fix this? Anyone who, I remember somebody watched my YouTube video. All right, I'll show you here. What we do is, if we go down and we hop back into here, select faster than a loop, what we do is we don't actually do all this mapping stuff. We're going to switch to text mode. We're going to remove all of this completely. We're going to type in add prop. We're going to click the expression, and we're going to type in add property. I picked the dynamic one, wrong one. Hold on. There we go. Let's zoom out. And what I'm going to type in here is how much more do I have to zoom out for this to actually be seen?
At least one more.
Yeah, clearly. Thank you. Finally. All right, so we type in add property here. We type in, once we select that, we have to type in the word item. That's just like a given. Hi, Heidi, do you have a question? Cool. Thank you. From here, we type in like TO2, whatever the name of the property is, so like license status. And then, because I want this to be really easy for you all to read, I have it on the screen here. Up here. Oh, that's in the next slide. All right, let's go back. Let's just finish up what I was doing. So in here, I actually have a full example of it because I figured this would happen where the demo, where I'd have to zoom in a lot, it'd be hard to see. I'm going to select this. And then let's zoom in on it and see exactly what happened. So I am taking the item. I added a new property. I typed this in called TOT credential status, and then I put the outputs. So watch what happens here. If I change this up to, in my final result, I'm not going to use that first select I did. I'm going to use the other select. So once I come in here and I do select not dropping things, watch how awesome this is. If I come into here and then I look at it, our other select took data that looked like this, where it had all the instructors and all their stuff, and as you saw, it removed it. Our other one, select not dropping things, took the same input, but then the actual output of it, look at that. Credential status, it preserved the original object. This is my go-to for like anyone on my team. I always remind them of like, this is one of the first things I show them about Power Automate because it prevents that problem. Now we're going to go do that same thing back here. I'm going to rerun this. Now, give me a thumbs up if you think it'll work, or give me a thumbs down if you think it'll fail in the chat, please. All right, we got a lot of thumbs up, so let's see. By the way, sometimes I do this and this still fails because it's something else and I really embarrass myself, but you know, demos. So we'll see. Oh, it ran. Awesome. Let's go take a look-see. And beautiful. And their age is 31. Beautiful. This was all preserved like we wanted it to be. Cool. So that concept there is you don't need to memorize the select statement. If you're doing this by moving variables around, that's fine, whatever you need to do. The point is that concept of you want to preserve the original data. All right, next thing is we're going to get into what somebody addressed, was talking about earlier, which is Power Automate gets really limited, which there was a nice way to do best practice this automatically. Yeah, right on. We'll see when Copilot catches up. So give me a thumbs up. I know it's some of you. Have you used XPath before in Power Automate? Okay, this is going to be your new best friend. And if I'm wrong, like that's fine. But I'm so sure of this. So check this out. I've got a SharePoint site here called Languages Spoken. And then I should have had this like right here on the board so you guys can actually see it. I'll try to pull it up here. So I have a SharePoint site. And it is not here. Let me pull it up over here, where it shows all of the languages that all of the instructor, is it here? Tell me it's here. Okay. Here it is. Beautiful. This is going to make it easier what I'm talking about. So I have all these instructors, and here's the languages that they speak, right? But remember, this is all in SharePoint. My instructors come from Dataverse. But because I didn't build this system, somebody else put all of the languages in this other system. So now what I need to do is I need to take my Dataverse instructors, take my SharePoint instructors, and shove them together. I need to take the properties from the language property from SharePoint, put it on my instructors. That is really tricky to do in Power Automate. That is a lot of loops, but not for all of us because we're super cool. So let me show you a way to do that. If we go in here, we can use something called XML. If you haven't used XML before, it's gnarly. I'm not an expert. Few people are an expert. You don't even need to be. And I'll show you how. So check this out. Because yes. So in here, the first thing you need to do is just take your SharePoint result and just put it into this root array thing. Don't ask me why. It's just what you have to do with XML. The next thing you do is you use this XML function. It just XMLifies all of the JSON you just had. It'll be easier with an example. If we go in here, here is all of my like SharePoint stuff. Here's the language they speak and all of that. And then over here, I have the create the XML. So let's take all of this. And we're going to use this tool called XPathers. So we're going to delete all this. I'm going to put it in here. Let's format it. Cool, we got a bunch of XML in here. All right, so what does this actually mean? Well, what we can do now is if we go in here and we start typing in certain things, we can query this XML, and this is quite powerful. I go into root array, and like, all right, it is, if you look here, it's selecting everything, but I'm going to select a specific thing. I want to query it where SQL ID equals, I don't know, 7. Will that work? Cool. So now look, it selected this specific person here via XPath. And I can change this up. I'm going to say select number 3. It's changing who it's selecting. This can go a step further. I can come down here and then say languages spoken. And look, it's selecting Italian. It's selecting the right person. Let me pick a different one. There we go, Spanish. It's getting specific parts of the XML. This is going to get really powerful really fast. So we released you can do all this in public space with WordPress. Yes, yes. And all of the PHP that comes with it, I imagine. Do you have to go from JSON to XML first? You absolutely do. So because we're using XPath, that's what allows you to do it. So the next step here is I have this join statement, and we're going to zoom in real fast on this so we can see what it's actually doing. Hold on. Thank you. And all I'm doing is instead of hard coding the SQL, I'm now just dynamically choosing it. So what I end up happening is similar to what I showed you earlier, is I have a result that looks like this. We're using our select, and now I just have a bunch of this. A bunch of dynamically selecting the right SQL ID from my SharePoint list. All right. Now, in my SharePoint list, I have this SQL ID. Oh, you don't see it. I have this SQL ID here. In Dataverse, I have the same SQL ID, so we're going to use that as our key, as our foreign key to connect the data. So what I'm going to do next is, and this expression is a bit insane. If we go into here, didn't somebody mention GitHub for Copilot? I think, Heidi, you said you wanted to see that. I can show it real fast. So I have this add property that I wrote, and GitHub for Copilot's pretty neat. I will show you it up here. I think I have it installed. There it is. Cool. Format this nicer, and I'm just going to paste in what I had earlier. Let's zoom in. Generating. Oh, look, it's writing code for me. This is the future. So very cool. And then, actually, I haven't tried this yet. Replace languages spoken with, I don't know, favorite color. See if it figures that out. Oh, look, it did that. Cool. Yeah. All right. So that's not really related to the demo, but Heidi, I wanted to honor your question. So if we look closely at what this is actually doing, I will accept this. We have here, we're selecting our item. And then I actually don't like all this white. I feel like it's hard for you all to see the real clear differences. So I put this on a slide. So what's happening is we're selecting the item, we're selecting the languages spoken, and then our XPath is getting a little bananas. So we have our outputs from earlier, and then we're doing the concat where we're taking that SQL ID, dynamically putting in a new SQL ID, and then selecting the language. So we're dynamically choosing the right language based on the match, and we're adding it back to our original object. Remember when we originally added the license, and do they still have a license? This is just what we're doing here. All right, so when we actually run this, let's come in here, and we go into the join. Here is what our data originally looked like, is this. So cool, we have all our instructors, blah, blah, blah. We would also, if we connected it to our other flow down here, we would have our license status. All right, so we have our instructors, great. But look at the output now. If we look at the output, look at that. It found the language it matched them, and it connected it back to the right person. So I just took data in SharePoint, connected it back to my Dataverse data, and this is the thing I was talking about performance. I did this all in 1, 2, 3, 4 actions. Go try to do that with an apply to each. You will lose it. It won't be. It'll take forever. And by the way, Nico, who has to work on your code later, will be really disappointed because now he has to maintain all that. Also, if you want to get fancy, you don't even need 4. You can probably do this in 3 if you just use the XML in here. Cool. All right. I'm happy that is of benefit to some. And maybe some of you are still not impressed. Fine. I got another trick. What else you can do with XML is you could do things like groupings and aggregates. All right. This is where things get a little insane. So I have all of this data here of ratings for my instructors. So if Alex is SQL ID number 3, so that means his first rating was a 3 out of 5. Maybe he wasn't very excited when he gave the canoeing trip. Then he got a 1. I guess maybe he didn't sleep well. And then he got a 5, so he brought all of his energy. We want to total all of his scores, okay? We want to total, and this is what's going to be bananas. We want to total all of his scores and put it back on his record. So I'm going to take all of this here, and then we're going to go put this all into XML, all right? So we've already seen how to do that. We just do the root array trick. And then we're going to do the exact same thing as last time, where we are taking it, and then we're going to just turn it into XML again. So what does it look like as XML? As XML, it looks like this. Take all this. It's a little ugly. I'm going to go to XPather. I'm going to paste this. We're going to format it. And then cool. So obviously this doesn't make any sense. Let's delete all of that. And then now what we could do is we could start to do some fancy aggregations on it. So what I'm going to do here is I want to summarize all of that. So first, let's go to array root and then do the same thing as last time. So let me do root array, and then we're going to do SQL ID equals, well, I don't know, 5. And then cool. All right. So everyone who's SQL ID 5, I got all of their totals. Pretty neat. Oh, and by the way, this is case sensitive, which is kind of annoying, so watch out for that. So we go here, and then I also want to come down here, and I want to select a specific thing, because look, I'm selecting their SQL ID and their rating. I don't care about their SQL ID. I want to just get their rating. All right, there we go, 532. Those are the ratings for the person with SQL ID 5. If I select SQL ID 3, I get those. Watch this. If I go to the very beginning, and I type in the word sum, and I throw that in at the end, I am now adding all of the aggregates together. So now I'm adding all of his ratings. I also have some other cool stuff of average. I can do that as well. I have a few different options here. And then, just like we did last time, instead of simply using, we're going to use the select again. We're going to use the add property. And what we're going to do now is, let me snag this for you to show you. We're going to do the same thing as before. Create a property called rating sum. All right. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use the same SQL ID, but now to dynamically pick it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add this rating to the original instructor. So what this ends up looking like is we come down here and we go into our select, and our original input was this. So pretty cool. We have our instructor. We have that they speak Spanish. We have that they speak Russian. Now what we're going to do, if we look at our outputs, we have that they speak Spanish, and look at their ratings. We now have aggregates added to this. We have literally taken data, grouped it, added it. We've done some fairly advanced SQL operations like inner joins and did this all right here. And what's insane is, let's count it out. We did it in 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of code. Again, we just did some very heavy, what would be done in an apply to each. We did it all here, and I don't know about you, but this all ran in 0 seconds. Incredibly performant. I'm in a lot of scenarios where I need my Power Automate flows to run really fast. A, because I'm impatient, and B, because, does anyone actually know the answer to this? in Canvas apps, if I call a Power Automate flow, like how long do I have? Does anyone know that number off the top of their head? So the answer is, the last time I checked, it's 2 minutes. If your Power Automate flow isn't done in 2 minutes, like it stops, it cancels the operation. There is other scenarios where there are limitations how often it can run, and this is where using these optimizations can really help you out. All right, we're taking a pause here because I think I have Heidi. I have 15 minutes, yeah?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, sweet. Let's go further with this. Let's get into all my Dataverse Excel people. I'm not ignoring all the Excel people. Excel is cool. It's not something that should be frowned upon. Let's take a look at it. So I have this Excel sheet here. I'm going to go populate it with one of my very straightforward flows. So here's what my flow is doing. It's taking this list of activities. So like I have tennis, whatever geocaching is. If you do geocaching, no offense, I just don't know what it is. And we have whitewater rafting. We're going to loop all of these activities and we're going to add them to the Excel row. But remember, we know we need to make it run fast. Cool? So we're going to crank it up to 48. All right? And then one more thing just to make sure all my settings are right. I do want this to run, so let me save that. And then I want to turn this one off so I can prove a point here. All right, this one, good. All I'm doing here with this testing button is I'm turning it off. It basically means it's not going to actually run what I just said. All right, so now I'm going to run this. And my question, geocaching is cool, yeah. I'm going to run this, and we're going to see if you can spot the issue with it. So everything hopefully is saved. And let's resubmit. All right, it's doing its thing. It's running. It's taking its time. It finished 2 seconds each. All right, here's our Excel. Oh, cool. It did it. Yeah, man, this is awesome. We're good. Does anybody see a problem here? Who wants to bravely raise their hand and be like, something's a little off? Something our users, if they looked at this, they're like, this actually isn't very helpful. Thank you, David Sorois. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Wait, there's 2 Davids here and a David Wade. Exactly. This is out of order. Your users, it's going to drive them nuts. How often I get a message saying, hey, I can't figure out why my Power Automate is misbehaving or where the order is wrong. Every time I don't even look at the code, I'm like, are you doing concurrency? That's the danger of concurrency, is because you run into that scenario where concurrency is what it means. It's running it at multiple times, so your order is out the window. So what's my solution? I'm going to run it those danger levels don't seem right. Yeah, I know. It's probably a little insane that geocaching is high because I don't think it's a very intense activity, but I could be wrong. So yeah. But in this case, the main issue is the order. So what are my options? I'm going to run this one at a time? No, we're all about performance and speeding things up. Who's used the Graph API here? Anyone? Depends on the geocache. Has anyone? Okay, we got, who was it? Neil, you've used it? Not surprised. Graph API is great. What it does is, I'll pull it up here. Let's see. Is this the one where I can try it out? No, it's down here. Cool. You could go in here and you can play with it. It's an API to almost all of the Microsoft systems. It's what Copilot is using behind the scenes to do all of the fancy stuff. So what you can do with Graph API is, if you use it, it gives you more power than Power Automate. I realize I just said the word power a lot. So if we go in here and I hit plus and I type in SharePoint, I get all of these actions. Here's the thing. The Graph API has much more powers than this. SharePoint, all it's using in the background is it's making API calls. All these actions are using API calls. However, because the Power Automate team I'm guessing doesn't always have time to build every action for every Graph API, what you can do is use the Graph API to do things Power Automate can't. I'll give you an example. In here, what I'm doing is I'm using the Graph API. Let me zoom out. Off topic, is there a reason the concurrency box was in Spanish? I speak it, and I think my language settings are getting messed up. All right, if we go down here, I'm passing it in the old-fashioned way. Like an API call, I'm taking all of my the JSON of the activities, and I'm putting them into here. How did I get this specific path? Well, I will show you. If we go up here, there's a lot of SharePoint actions or a lot of Graph API calls that don't exist, like I said. For instance, you can have a Graph API call that says, query all my SharePoint sites and show me the SharePoint sites with the name of like Spanish or television. Something you can't do with Power Automate actions. Like that's a specific Graph API thing. So anyways, I use the Graph API to make certain calls to figure out where does this Excel file live and what's its ID. That's how I got that. Now, all right, I have my awesome Graph API call, and what I'm going to do is something a little different. I'm going to turn it on. Or sorry, yes, I'm going to turn it on, so now it's going to run. The other thing I'm going to do is our code here that adds it one at a time, I'm going to keep this. And then let me make sure, yeah, concurrency. I'm going to turn this back on. So we're going to run both at the same time, and we're going to see what happens. All right, so I've got that all set. And then the last thing is, oh, I should probably delete all this stuff. So let me get rid of that here. Cool. So just in case you all know that I didn't plan this ahead of time. All right, let's resubmit and let's see what happens. All right, it's running, it's doing its thing. Cool, that took 3 seconds. That took 4 seconds plus 1 second for each row. Let's look at our final results. Oh, look at that. Isn't that beautifully ordered? Isn't that nice? Aren't all your users super happy with this? And then, of course, we have like someone who wasn't paying attention, and we have the other one here, as you can see as a comparison. Could you clone the SharePoint connector and extend it with additional Graph APIs that your citizen dev can use them without having to maintain the knowledge associated? Totally. You totally could. Are you talking about, Nick, making your own custom connector?
Yeah, you can pull the Swagger from the JSON. You can clone it directly from the first-party ones, and you can extend it so that you can separate concerns from the developer side and the citizen developer side.
Got it. Go ahead. Yeah, I think at that point, if they're good enough to use the custom connector, I'll probably spend the extra time just training them on the Graph API. But it's up to you. You could totally do what you just said. And actually, well, why don't we segue into custom connectors in a second? Thanks, Nick, for prepping that. So yeah, I hope you saw the benefit there. Let's move on. Very cool in Excel. Same concept in Dataverse. So I have this task table right here. And what I'm going to do is I need to populate it. I need to populate it with files from SharePoint. So all my files in SharePoint, I want them to become tasks in Dataverse. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, and instead of doing the add a new row Dataverse action, I'm going to use the batch create action. The batch create is not an option with out-of-the-box Dataverse actions. You can only do that with the Graph API. So what that looks like is, let's go to a previous run. And I'm speeding things up because I only have like 7 minutes. So if we go into here, what I'm doing is all of this is just showing you just the general concepts. Like look, here my Graph API calls show me all the accounts that have name, that have revenue is in top 1. I'm just doing that and just kind of seeing what my results are for that. I'm just proving that the Graph API lets you do basic queries. But here's the thing. I think the Dataverse actions for querying are great. So I don't need the Graph API usually for that. But I do need it for this. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating this batch request. So let me show you what that looks. Oh, it's not pretty because it's like this. All right, let me show you it in code. What I'm doing is, there we go. I am taking the name of my SharePoint file because I want all my files to become tasks. I have the name of the SharePoint file. I have to create these. I'm hard coding this connection to an account just to prove that I can do lookups. And then I have to set it up like this, where it says this is the content type. This is the endpoint I'm going to. This is just what the Graph API needs to know. Where am I sending it to? Like, am I sending all your data to tasks, to accounts, what it is? Once I do all of this, and by the way, if I'm going too fast, I have a YouTube video on it. Once we actually run all this, let me run it, and we'll see what happens. So as you notice, I have like, I don't know, 10. Is this pure HTTP request in line? Can you elaborate on what you mean by that, Nick?
Well, you can open up a terminal and send HTTP requests in plain text, and that looks exactly like what you sent. So your browser sends off that, and it looks like you just write in the request line.
It's exactly the same. It's just in Power Automate instead of getting people opening the terminal. Cool. So I went in here, and this took 0.6 seconds to run. If I were creating 10 tasks, it'd be like a second or less per task. And then if we look here, I hope this worked. And where's my refresh button? Come on. Fine, I will just refresh the page. Oh, wait, do I have it open? All right, let me refresh here, see if we got it.
It's really cool, Sean.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate it. Well, it'll be cool if this actually... Oh, there they are. Look at that. 0.6 seconds created a bunch of tasks for me. So all of this much, much faster than just doing it as a one-at-a-time action. By the way, does anybody from memory know how many actions, how many requests you have in one day? Like how many you can run on a standard Power Automate plan? All right. I only know this because I was playing with it. 40,000 last time I checked. 40,000 sounds like a lot. But remember, each of these things is one action, is one request. So if you're looping a bunch of stuff, you're going to burn through all of your requests. But as you can tell here, this is just one request. Something else to keep in mind. You're probably, I don't know if you're migrating like tens of thousands of records a day in Power Automate, but this would be something to watch out for. Cool. I have 5 minutes. We're at the choose your own adventure part. What do y'all want? I could do something on custom connectors, or I could do something on Azure Functions. Choose your own adventure. So please put in the chat, what would you like to see? Something on a custom connector or something on an Azure function? All right. We got custom connectors. We got custom. All right. You've pretty much answered my question. All right. So we'll go with that. Nobody ever wants Azure functions. They're so cool. All right. So what I have here is, if I come back out here, and then I have this, what you can do with Azure functions that's very, very cool is, let me go here to wrong one. Actually, no, this is fine. You could go to an area called custom connectors. I want to hear Azure functions. Jonathan, next time. So if we go under here under custom connectors, what I can do is kind of what Nick was talking about, which is I'm going to make a custom connector that connects to SharePoint. That's how almost everybody uses it. However, what you can also do is you can come in here and then there's a special area where you can put in your own code, specifically C# code. So if I come down here to code, and actually let me pick the environment that actually has this so it'll be better. 1 second. What I can do is inside of these custom connectors, I can go in and put in my own C# code. So custom connectors are supposed to be for what Nick said, which is I want to make requests to other systems. But you can make 0 requests and just run C# on your own code. And of course, because I'm doing a demo, this is not loading. And honestly, I'm fine with it. The fact that all my other demos work today, like I am delighted because like I have 50 tabs open and like showing all of it live. So like the fact that it works is good enough. Pretend there's a custom connector here. And pretend I'm on the first page, yeah, and instead of choosing a URL, I'm just going to write the word home because there's no URLs here. And over here, as you can tell, I'm going to click the button that says Input Custom Code. And here is where I have C# that I would paste. All right, let me show you what that actually looks like. Hopefully Power Automate isn't failing for me. So if we go down here to where I was earlier, I'm going to go down and I'm going to press Add an Action. And I'm going to come in here, and if you select custom, if we zoom in here, I have this thing called regex assistant. This is going to do regex for me. Here's my problem statement is that I have a lot of phone numbers that, where is it? I have a lot of phone numbers that are bizarre that look like this, and I want to format them nicely with parentheses, with a dash in the right place. I want it to work. If you try to do this in Power Automate, like It would be ridiculous because there are so many different ways that a phone number could be, you would be guessing. However, with the regex, it's going to make it a lot easier. And by the way, if you don't believe that this is completely custom and made, I don't think Microsoft is putting Bon Jovi on the name of their icon. So clearly made this one. So in here, if we zoom out, once I select my custom connector called regex, I go down here and I have this one called format phone number. I made this. I barely even made this. Copilot wrote the C# for me. I'm going to go into here and then I can put in my phone number and it will solve it and it will fix it for me. So what that looks like is down here, I have this weird phone number and then I come over here and I say, go format it. So my phone number came in like that. And then look, it formatted it for me. This is just one of the things you can do with it. I will say, again, as any good architect, I have to warn you of all the limitations so you don't start overpromising stuff. Who wants to take a guess how long this code can run for? Like, how long can the C# code run for? Like, seconds, minutes? Like, there's a limit to how long they give you. 30 seconds. Jonathan, terrific guess. Yeah, it's a little shorter than that. It's 5 seconds. So you better have this thing done right away. So, but 5 seconds in C# world is a really long time. It's kind of like human years versus dog years. So C# code can run really, really fast. Azure functions like function apps, that would solve the limits. Yeah, exactly. Nick is absolutely correct. So all the limits that come with custom connector C# you can do with Azure functions. Of course, that's its own bag of complexity, which we can go into, but we're out of time. So boom. Heidi, 45 minutes flat. Oh, I have one more slide. Am I allowed to show it real fast?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Kylie, you can get us ready while Sean shows us our last slide.
Okay, sweet. I forgot about it. I just wanted to, oh man, the screen is black. Let's see if this works. Cool. You can, all right, I just wanted to thank you all for having me, Heidi and Kylie and the Philadelphia user group. I'm Sean. I run the Architects Accelerator. It's a training pro. Wait, Heidi, I'm not allowed to talk about like my training, right? Because that's technically like selling. I can't say that.
Sorry. Get out of here. Get your slide out of here.
Okay. Oh, whoops. You didn't see that. Just look at this part up here. The end. All right.
All good. Make sure you guys follow Sean on LinkedIn. He puts out great content. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And now we will transition over to 45 tips, actually more, in 45 minutes. Kylie?
We're ready. We're ready. So I didn't update the slide, but Heidi, how many tips did we do last week?
90 something.
That
was 60 minutes.
Yeah, 60 minutes. We did 93 tips. So be putting your ideas in the chat of how many tips you think we're going to get to. So welcome everyone. Yeah, we're going to do 45 tips, minimum of 45 tips in 45 minutes. And how this works is we have this lovely app that is going to randomly pop up tips for us, and we will talk about them. And we'll see how many we can get through. Heidi, you ready? Anything else to add before we start?
Let's do it.
Okay.
I feel like I should have stretched before.
Yeah, I went.
Am I starting or you?
You can do the first one.
Okay.
Ready and go.
What's fun is we have no idea what comes up. It's completely random.
Perfect for you.
Oh, great. This is my tip. So this is about end user training, which is applicable everywhere, right? This isn't just Power Platform. So my tip here is to make sure that you're delivering role-based training. So instead of gathering all of your users in one room and telling everybody everything about all of your phenomenal apps that you've created, what you really should consider doing is group your training based on how people are going to use the tech. So in this little visual, the orange arrow are like the things everyone is going to need to know. So I'm going to have my core training with all my users about that. Then I'm going to group up the other things based on what the job role is and how they're going to be using the technology. So this ends up in a better training experience for your users and awesome, happy people.
Okay. We also want to encourage you to find the best mobile app for your users. So back in the day, we used to have Dynamics 365 for phones. Don't use that anymore. It used to be the only one you could use for offline, but that's no longer true. There's also the Dynamics 365 Sales app, which is more optimized for sellers. Last I checked, wasn't optimized for offline, but that stuff keeps improving. And there are a few other Dynamics 365 specific apps, and they just look a little bit different and they're more streamlined. But usually what I'm recommending to our users is the Power Apps app. You can access any of your model-driven apps there, and it's kind of our modern version, works the same, and offline.
All right, so back in the model-driven app world, let's talk a little bit about the app settings area. So I think most people know in model-driven apps, you can add different pages and different things in your app. What you should check out once you're in your app designer are the app settings. And it's very important, these are the app settings after you've already opened up your app in the app designer window. So there are not a lot of things that you can update here, things like your icon, your app name, and the description if your users are picking multiple things. In the features area is where you can turn on in-app notifications, enable the Power BI quick report visualization, turn offline on so you can access the apps like Kylie was talking about offline, and then turn on timeline highlights by generative AI. Check out upcoming, and that's going to be all your preview features.
Also, on your security roles, you want to check this team inheritance setting, especially if you've been doing Dynamics or Power Platform Dataverse stuff for a long time, right? So this is visible on the security role definition. All new roles being created are set up direct user and team, but if you have roles that you've had around for a long time, they might be set to team privileges only. If you're using, one of our other tips is to put your roles at the team level, and if you're using that, you want this to be set to direct user and team, so they would get the access of the team and the access of themselves. Otherwise, it doesn't quite work just to put it at the team level.
All right, we have a lot of tools about the XRM toolbox within this slide deck. So if you're not using it, you should, if you're using Dataverse or model-driven apps. The XRM toolbox is a free community tool with many, many tools that are designed to help make your life easier. It does things that the tech doesn't. This one is a relatively simple one. It's the record counter. So you would run this on your instance in the specific environment that you're looking for, and then it'll show you the table and it's got what, display name and schema name, and then just a count of how many records are in your Dataverse for each of those. So there are many cooler tools, but this is a useful tool for some people. I feel like if it is, it really resonates with you here.
I like it for like migrations or archiving, all kinds of stuff. Okay, sorry, I'm getting caught up. So Copilot for Power Automate. So this is something, maybe you guys talked about it at the beginning of the last session that I missed, but now you can use Copilot to help you build out your Power Automate. So you just type in what you want your automation to do in natural language, and it will give you a suggested flow that you can edit, and it will build it for you to start working from. I think this is a great way, especially when you're learning Power Automate, but also what we'll talk about with all these Copilot tools, right, is make sure you're reviewing what it's suggesting, making sure that it makes sense and aligns with all the best practices that we've been talking about.
There's like a delay.
Uh-oh, what happened?
Uh-oh.
This has never happened before.
Why don't you do hurry up?
There we go. Okay.
Oh, hey, we
Panicked.
saw this a lot in Sean's stuff, right? So this is using Compose action. Compose is one of, I think, 17 connectors that are provided to you. They're the built-in connectors in Power Automate. So you would use the Compose action to do formulas, expressions, all that fun stuff. And you would reference that data later in your flows, just like you do with a variable. So that can be used within loops to save that value for that instance. So I think we saw quite a bit of this in Sean's presentation, which is perfect.
Okay, we also have the Creator Kit. So this is for anybody working on your Canvas Power Apps. This is a way that can provide you tools to make your apps more beautiful. So they have some reference apps, some template apps for you, also some new components that you can make use of that just to make your apps look better. Also, this is required if you're using the Center of Excellence Toolkit. So this would be something that you have to install to be able to install the Center of Excellence Toolkit that we have another tip on. But it's something you should check out at that short URL so you can look at the code components that are available and check out all the pretty things to make your apps look better.
We like pretty things. Oh, all right. Another XRM toolbox tool. So this one I like a lot better. I find this as a system administrator super helpful. So if you are at all tasked with managing Dynamics 365 systems as a system admin or helping your end users, you need this tool. It's called the User Settings Utility. This allows you to set personal settings for your users. So you don't have to walk them through the process of click the little gear icon, go to personal options, do all these things. Great for things like updating your time zone. If your organization is based in EST, but you sit on the West Coast and you want your appointments to show up in your local time, that's where you're going to update something like that. And there's also email tracking options like, never mind.
And this would have been a good tip for you to have, but we want to automate our manual tasks with Power Automate. So we have so many connectors. I think, Heidi, you said you updated this number last week. Currently, over 1,200 Microsoft certified connectors that you can use, plus our custom connectors that we were talking about at the end of the last meeting. And so lots of options that we have to start doing this automation, right? So any manual tasks that you have in your environment, you can get those automated. And Nick is telling us we now have 1,251 Microsoft certified connectors. So use those and stop doing manual things.
Oh, this is one of Kylie's favorite security tips. Remove sharing, because do you really need sharing? Now, this is a tip because both Kylie and I, and probably some of you on the phone, have gone down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out why did someone get that access they weren't supposed to have. I looked at their security role. Everything's fine. They shouldn't have had the ability to delete all 5,000 leads in their bucket. Well, sometimes that comes down to sharing. Was that record shared with them? Well, that gives them additional permissions above what you have carefully crafted on their individual security roles. So, recommendation here, remove sharing. Go to the ribbon tool bench or however you're editing your ribbons and just remove the access to sharing so they don't even know that it's possible.
Also, I have a whole bunch of tips in here around AI Builder because I love it and I think it's so fun. And so you have in AI Builder the business card reader. So for people who are still using business cards, this is something that you can, it's already included in the sales model-driven, dynamic sales model-driven app, but you could also add it to any Canvas app or model-driven apps or just to Power Automate, right? And this is a pre-built model, so you don't need to do any configuration, just add it in, and then you can act on that data and use it however you want. I think that supported languages is out of date. There are much more supported languages across all of the AI Builder tools now.
Column security profile, sometimes called column security profiles, sometimes called field security profiles. So know that it's the same thing. What this is going to do is give you the ability to give granular access to specific users or specific teams of users to either read, create, or update a specific record. This is really good on sensitive information. For example, like a social security number on the contact field. Maybe you don't want people to be able to read that at all. Maybe you want that to just be asterisks to show up. And that's where you could kind of define that and who should be able to update that data. If it's not as simple as everyone with this security role gets access, this is kind of the next level down.
Approvals kit. So something else as we're talking about Power Automate, one of the things you need to do if you're doing Power Automate is use the approvals, because that's a great way to start getting rid of those manual processes like we talked about, right? And we also have the approvals kit to kind of make those approvals more customized and to support kind of different approval methods and just make it even easier as you're building that out. You can also do some of this by building tables in your model-driven app to guide your approvals and do some of that logic in the flow, or you can check out the approvals kit to make it easier. Perfect timing.
Next tip. That was perfect.
You're getting all the security tips.
I know, right? Another security tip. These are all Kylie's tips. Check for dangerous permissions, right? And what we're talking about here are things like bulk delete, bulk edit, and export to Excel, which may or may not be dangerous. So a lot of these are granted by default on the default security roles that you get when you spin up a new instance, which, by the way, we don't recommend using. Hopefully that tip doesn't show up next. And what you want to do is make sure that on this miscellaneous privileges area and privacy related privileges that your users don't have access to do things that you might not want them to. Like bulk delete, that can wreak havoc. And there's no like Control Z in Dynamics or Power Apps, right? You can't just undo that.
Okay, custom help pane. So in our model-driven apps, we actually have the ability to customize that little help arrow. And I think a lot of this is something that I didn't know about for a long time, which is that you can customize that pane to add things like little different links, and not just one link, but multiple links, bullets and numbered lists, different sections, even videos and images, and even the balloons and coach marks. And this is stuff that can be all done out of the box with your standard licensing in your model-driven apps. You don't need any extra third-party products to do this, but not many people are taking advantage of it.
This is a tip for Dynamics 365 app for Outlook. I know Copilot, but not everyone has licensing for Copilot, and some people are still on-premise, believe it or not, and there are still use cases for this. So for those of you using Dynamics app for Outlook, you don't have to be CRM. You can do model-driven apps too. You can add your custom tables to it. So it's not just the out-of-the-box tables. And the way that you would do that is enabling activities on the custom table. We've got kind of the areas highlighted here. So make sure that you make this table an option when creating a new activity. Careful here, there's no undo unless you use XRM Toolbox. And then you're going to edit the model-driven app. For Dynamics app for Outlook, you're going to add a new page and select your custom table, and magic occurs.
Also, you can use this visualize your data from your model-driven Power Apps. So you'll see in Dynamics or in any model-driven app, there's this new, well, I think we can still say new button that says visualize this view that will actually pop up some suggested reports using Power BI visuals. And then you can click from there to actually open it in Power BI and keep editing. So it's a great way to show your users some of the value of Power BI and start thinking about what your options are, and even kind of get a head start on building that out in Power BI and seeing what that'll look like.
Good tip. And you don't need a Power BI license to use that button.
Oh yeah, because you can use, oh sorry, that's another tip.
I know. Well, this is a quick one. So I'm sure most of you already know this, but if you want a little bit more flexibility in your model-driven apps, you're not limited just to dashboards and tables and all that stuff. You can add an embedded Canvas app. You can add a special page that will just bring in anything you want. So you can really extend your traditional model-driven app to like anything, right? You can make anything that your mind can come up with into a Canvas app and then embed that within your model-driven app so your users are only going to one place to access all of the data and all the functionality that you want them to use.
As our next tip loads, Sean asked a question. We're not answering questions. We don't have time. Maybe later. Dataverse, auto add columns to forms and views. So this is a new feature. I keep saying new, but I feel like this came out like last year. But you can actually, when you create a new column, you can choose the forms and views that you want to add it to. In general, I don't think you want to do this, right? Because you don't want it to just put them at the bottom of the form or at the edge of the view. You want to control that. But I think this is really great if you have any administrator views or anything like that, that you know you want to make sure all these columns get in that view. You can do that and just add it quickly to that administration view that you'll use later.
Right on. Here's Kylie's tip from earlier, the Center of Excellence Starter Kit. This is a free thing that you can access and import into your environment. You should be using the Center of Excellence Starter Kit that's going to help you with your overall ALM. It's going to help with user adoption. It's going to give you different tools that you can load onto your environment and start to use. So there is a link to the COE Starter Kit. If you're not using it, probably throw that into your sandbox first so you can set it all up. test everything there first before you put it into production. But highly, highly recommend checking that out if you haven't already.
We need to add a screenshot there to show all the cool things. Like it'll show you every connector that's in use. Okay. Also, use calculated fields, which should also say use formula fields now too, right?
That's
Write
a
that
different
down.
tip.
We should change
That's
this
a
to
different
formula.
tip.
Oh, okay. So calculated fields allow you to do these like if-then conditions, and these are calculated as soon as one of those data points on the record changes. So as soon as that record is saved, this item gets updated. What you should remember about this tip is that I can't use calculated fields to trigger workflows or like other some automation like that, but it's great for users to have visibility into that update or to see it in views and things like that. Also, now it is recommended to use formula fields, but I found calculated fields still better.
Look at
Oh,
that.
hey, they're right next to each other.
FX in your formula column. So there's a separate tip to use formula columns, but you can use PowerFX to write it. So if you're less familiar with PowerFX, I know in our intros, a lot of people were talking about trying to skill up and learn PowerFX. I have had great success using ChatGPT to help me define my PowerFX formula. I'm sure you can use Copilot too. I'm a big fan of ChatGPT. So this will give you a little more functionality, like Kylie was saying, versus that older calculated columns. And tip here, it cannot be used with rollup fields or plugins. So calculated fields can be used with rollup. So there's a use case where you might use calculated over formula.
And now we've been talking about how we have Copilot everywhere. We also have Copilot in Power BI. So you can use it to help you write some of your DAX queries or explain the queries that are there. And you can also use it for checking your syntax. And there's other buttons to help you get started with Copilot. And I believe I guess this is still in public preview. Everything we've seen, we keep seeing Copilot getting better and better. And it's especially great, like I'm not super familiar with Power BI, so it's great in this area that we can use it to help us improve our skills and make better use of these tools.
Well said. Perfect. So this tip is kind of an overall tip that you can use all of this technology that we've been talking about to help streamline your business processes. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. And these are just 4 tools that I thought from like the dynamics lens is honestly where I was coming from that will help you streamline business processes. Because I know not everyone has a defined business process. So these things are tools that you can use to help define it and have users adopt it and make sure that your customers are having the same sort of experience no matter who they're talking to. Business process flows, obviously Power Automate. And if you're Dynamics for sales, you have more enhanced features like sequences and work lists that can really help you do that as well.
And in one thing to help our forms work better and help things get prettier, we can change the colors on your option set. So you've probably seen this when you're in the Maker portal and you're setting up option sets. You can assign a color to those option sets. And you're probably like, where does this appear? I don't know. It's on the card form. So you can use that, and then you can show your cards to have different colors and values. You can also put emojis in your option sets. So, if you want to have an option set of how good something is and have your rating from like smiley face to frowny face, that's something that you can do to make it easier for users.
Another general user adoption tip. I love this graphic. I saw this somewhere last year. I was like, this is where I'm going to explain user adoption. So very important to make sure that you are involving your end users from the very beginning, from your requirement stage, not just for a new project, for like any roll-up. So let's think about it for a second here. We have our clients. They're saying, I want this beautiful mobile. It has to look like this. It's going to be great. But no one thought about the baby who's the end user who's just seeing the bottoms of all of these animals. So perhaps talking to your end users will help you craft an experience that not only helps them, but that they like, which means that they'll use it, which is the most important thing in everything that we do.
I feel like this is your tip, Heidi.
I love this tip. Do you want me to do it? All right,
Yes.
so this is replacing dynamic URL from classic workflow if you're in the CRM world. I'm sorry, Dynamics world. So you can recreate that, and it's awesome. Use the data operation connectors compose action to create a URL to a specific model-driven app record. So when your users get the end result of your flow, they can just click on the link. So it's model-driven app specific. I'm taking too long. Go to your Sales Hub or your Service Hub. Grab a copy of one of those records, copy paste it in your browser, remove the unique identifier string, replace it with the dynamic unique identifier from your record in the trigger step, and use it in future actions, and your users will get to use the link.
And I mean, related to this one, also you could use the variable to store that link in so that you could use it later. And we also have the concept of environment variables that you could use to have your specific organization URL so that you wouldn't have any differences between your environments. But anyways, variables in general, it's just a storage component for data that you want to use later. So it allows us to set something once, do one expression once that we're going to use throughout the flow, or maybe you have something that you're going to get in, you need to increment in some kind of loop or whatever, and you want to access that later. You can use those to access that data. So be thinking about that when you're building out your flows.
Business rule tip. So there's a lot of tips about business rules. This one is using the condition or the actions of set required. So obviously a huge barrier to entry for your end users is having a form and having like 20 required fields. There's not a sales rep in the world who's going to give you that data. So you're going to minimize the required fields needed when they're adding data. And then you're going to use this business rule and use set required actions to make it required only after certain data is given or after any conditions are met. So you can show it or you can require it and unrequire it based on the condition that you set. It also supports nested conditions, so you can get kind of advanced with this.
I love how every tip that comes up, we're like, what a great tip, as if we didn't write them all ourselves. Copilot for customer service. So we have copilots. I already said that this session. Copilots everywhere. One of the copilots that we have available is in customer service that you can use within Dynamics 365, and it has features such as summarizing your cases, summarizing the conversations up to this point, writing an email, looking at knowledge to generate the email to the customer. Also, you can now generate your knowledge base based on the case and just helping guide that chat conversation. And there's Copilot in customer service and separate licensing Copilot for customer service used outside of Dynamics.
Back to business process flows. Yay. Now, to add visualizations and, of course, prettiness, which has been the theme of a couple of these, you can add custom controls within your business process flow. Now, this is not something that is like out of the box functionality. You will need to edit the XML of your solution to do this, but this is really nice to break up the data. It's really helpful with some users to have some visualizations versus just the free text. So examples here, we've got that budget amount and it's showing us kind of like an arc, and then the toggle button on decision maker on this one. Toggles are way cooler than checkboxes, especially if your users are on mobile devices. It's really handy to have them in there.
And find the user's pain. So we want to find out why users are not using their system, right? And that can be done through job shadowing, through ride-alongs, through focus groups. But just look at what users are doing and figure out where they're struggling, whether that's where they're struggling in the system that we can improve or where that's struggling in their whole process, right? If it's something in their process, let's find a way to automate it, like we said in a previous tip, right? If we can automate something that improves their life, they're way more likely to start using the system, right? Remove as many clicks as you can, just make it easier and solve the issues that they're having to drive them to use the system and kind of see the value of the system that they have.
So this is a great general tip. Make sure you're selecting the proper column or field type when you're implementing a new field. Question number one should be, will this ever be on a chart? Will this be a KPI? If so, you're not going to use a free text field, right? You're going to use something else. So selecting the correct column type is very important. And this kind of changes sometimes, so this isn't an exclusive list, but right now these are your options. And you can see there are different subsets of different things here. There's a specific email field. If you're going to use an email address capture there, you would use email and not just plain text. There are different number fields that you're going to use. There are great lookups. The choice is important because there's choice or choices and great stuff like that.
And we talked about using environment groups. Well, we talked about using teams for your security roles, but there are a few other ways that you can use Active Directory teams. I guess we didn't have that tip yet, but if you have teams that are in Entra ID, formerly Active Directory, you can use that to create teams and handle the ownership of teams in Dynamics, but you can also use it for your environment groups, right? So you can assign it to an environment and ensure that users have to be in that group to be able to access that environment, right? So this prevents all those additional users from being added. It prevents maybe your real users from having access to dev.
And follow solution management best practices. We talked about how you're going to build in Sandbox, and you might move that over to a Q&A, or you might move it direct to production. But whatever you do, you're going to use solution files to package your changes and updates. You're going to use at least 2 environments. You're going to set up a custom prefix or publisher for your changes. Why? Well, we might get to that tip. We might not. In your solution file, you will not include all components. You will not include all metadata unless you need it. You're going to come up with a naming convention. You don't have to do this. This is just nice for all of your other makers to get on the same line for workflows, flows, business rules, and you're going to have your users test and verify all changes, because if you test them, everything's going to work great.
And more security. Now I finally get to do a security tip. Remove delete for everything, right? So is there a reason for your users to delete? Generally, no, right? Let them deactivate instead. And all those out-of-the-box security roles, which I'm not sure we're going to have that tip, but don't use them. If you're using those roles, they have delete for a lot of things, and we probably don't want your users to be able to delete accounts, delete activities, delete, any of these records, or maybe delete their opportunities that they lost, right? We need to check, go and remove that, and click on the header delete, and then it can clean up that whole column for you and remove that, except for views. They might need to delete
another
their own
XRM toolbox tool. So this XRM toolbox tool I use a lot. It's called the Fetch XML Builder. This is built by an MVP, Jonas Rapp, and it is such a time saver if you don't know how to write queries in the Power Automate world in the correct dialect. So this is great. You can enter your query. It feels just like old school advanced find, that new one. You just create that query within Fetch XML Builder. At the very top, there's that little green play button. It says execute, and then it's going to spit out all the parameters that you simply need to copy and paste into Power Automate. How cool is that?
Also, form a group of your end users. So this relates to finding the user's pain and finding what users want you to automate. And you can do that through like a focus group of your end users. And I encourage this group should have, your super users, your champions, but it should also have people who don't like the system, right? Because we want to figure out why they don't like it, and we want to use this to change those detractors into the champions, right? Because when you get those people involved and find out what their concerns are, what they're struggling with, they're expressing what so many other people are having struggles with too, right? And if we can make them happy, we're going to make all of our users happy. But make sure we have varied skill levels and get them involved.
This tip is about some really good community resources. You've already found local user groups. You're here. Congratulations. Make sure you keep coming. There's also probably a local user group closer to you, because I know a lot of you are outside of the Philly area. So check that out. Also, if you haven't subscribed, make sure you go to ppweekly.com. It is a great weekly newsletter that calls together all the information happening in our industry and our world. PCF Gallery, we might have a tip later. Those are some great different tools to visualize your data. And then connectorreview.com is a labor of love for Nick and I. That is tagging all of the Power Automate connectors by use case, so you can find what you're looking for if you don't know the vendor that you want to work with yet.
when you're working in your model-driven apps, whether regular model-driven apps or dynamics, you have this ability to use like a modal dialog. So it's that checkbox, use main form dialog for create. So right now, like if you click that, say we're on a contact and you need to create their parent account, if you click that create button, it might open the quick create, or it might take you to a whole different form and you lose what you're doing on the contact. But if you use this use main form dialog for create, then it's going to pop up in this modal dialog on top of the form you're working on that you can create that record and just save it right there using the full form instead of just the quick create. So really helpful to kind of give users more functionality and keep them all working in the one screen.
Love the cats. It has nothing to do with the tip. All right, so this tip is
They're so cute.
They are cute. They love it. It's a tip to create and use a configuration table. So this is a great way that you can hold data. For our example here is data that's going to be needed to ping on Power Automate. So this could be something that you can manage within Dataverse or within your app or whatever you're doing, and then just point your flows to this configuration table so your dynamic values will change. So I think examples we've talked about in the past is put like all your approvals information. Who are the approvers here? And then you can just manage it here without having to go in and edit your flow. So great if you're going to be changing things often without having to go in and modify the full automation that you have.
Okay. We talked a little bit about App for Outlook already, and there are still some use cases for App for Outlook if you're not ready to use all of Copilot yet. And within the App for Outlook, you can actually customize the data that comes up for, say, the account that you're linked to or the contact that you're linked to so that it's relevant for your organization. And that's using this quick view form. And so you could say, like, for instance, I think the business name comes up, but if you're not using business names, maybe you're using families or something, you could remove that and add in a different field here that would be more relevant for your business.
Great tip. Yeah, right.
Oh, perfect.
Hilarious timing. Again,
our order has been perfection today.
So again, you don't have to have a CRM, a Dynamics CE license to use the Dynamics app for Outlook. You can actually just pay $5 per user per month, and then it's another model-driven app in your org. So you can track emails with one click. You can set your Outlook meetings regarding a record in Power Apps or Dynamics if you're using it. You can create new records, but I did put in there if you're using sales tables with Dynamics for sales, it's probably worth checking out Copilot for sales. I actually have I have three. I have the Dynamics app for Outlook, I have Copilot for sales, and I have Copilot for service, all within my Outlook, and I use the app for Outlook a lot more than I thought I would still.
All right, our 45th tip, and this is exactly what Sean was talking about. Be aware that you can set the concurrency on your apply to eaches, on your loops, so that you know how many times it can run in parallel. Be aware you probably don't want to be using variables in this, right? Because they're going to be interacting with each other, but you could use the compose action like we talked about. Or you can turn this down if you can only have it running one at a time and we don't care about performance. We want to forget everything we learned in the last presentation. You can do that. But check out this to figure out how your performance is. And yes, that's our 45th tip. We have 9 minutes to go. Ooh. So let's see how many more we can get through.
Oh, do you want to do this one? This is your baby.
Sure. AI Builder. Have I told you that I love it? One of the really cool tools within AI Builder is the invoice processor. So our kind of generic AI Builder tip didn't come up yet, but in AI Builder, there are a whole bunch of pre-built models as well as models that you can customize. All of it is point and click, and it's all like low code. Throw it into Power Apps or Power Automate. So the invoice processor is a document model that is already formatted with all of the common fields you'll see on the invoice. So you could start using this as it is. You can test it in there with your invoices, or you can customize it to add additional business fields that exist on your invoices.
Use Copilot to create Copilots. Use Copilot for all these awesome things. But if you need to create a custom Copilot, dang it, why don't you use Copilot to do it? Just throw in natural language of what you're hoping to get out of it, or you can see below where it's described your Copilot to create it. There are some pre-existing templates, so those will work better. The I have found the describe it to design it type functionality, it's okay. It'll get you a framework, but like Kylie said before, verify everything it spits out because it usually doesn't get everything, especially if you have any differentiated logic whatsoever. Your Copilot probably isn't going to get it, but it's great to get started and play around with the tech.
Hopefully no one from Microsoft is here listening to us. We talked about this a little bit. Manage your security with teams. So use your Entra ID groups or office groups to manage your security. You're going to set up that group in Entra ID. Then you set up the team in Dynamics or Dataverse, right? And link up with that Entra ID group. And then you can assign roles to your team in Dataverse. And then whenever users are assigned to that Entra ID group, they're automatically assigned to the team. They automatically have that security role. And so that means as an administrator, you don't have to do that function, right? That can all be managed by your help desk or whoever controls your Entra ID groups.
Did we kind of cover this on the other one about environment
Maybe.
round?
And we're getting
Yeah,
to the
let's
end.
skip
We
it.
need to have our best tips. So give a 1
Skip
second.
it, skip it.
One
Now
second
10 seconds
overview.
less on this one. Okay, use column controls on your Power Apps. So these are different visualizations. These change all the time. They used to have some that I loved, like star rating. It got deprecated. So check back with what's here, but these are other great ways to visualize your data within a form. You would just select the column on the form, then go to that components box on the bottom right-hand corner, add component, and if there are any out-of-the-box ones that Microsoft is providing, they'll show up there based on the column type that you're using. So things like the toggle, number input, pen input, which is cool.
And business rules, we talked about how you can set, I think we talked about on this one, showing and hiding records or showing and hiding fields with your business rule, or you can also make things required, but you can also minimize the required fields on the form, right? I think I jumped ahead. But so when based on the data that is entered, you could set different fields to required. Also make sure you always set the yes and no path, right? So in this case, we're saying like if the city contains data, we're setting the state to required, right? We also want to include the opposite of if the city is blank, then make sure state is not required so that we don't run into a case where they added the city and then they remove it, but it's still making state required, right?
Oh, this is a web page that I found kind of recently. So this is in Microsoft Learn, and I thought it was a cool tip. So there is an entire Learn area dedicated to Power Automate troubleshooting. So grab that QR code, scan it now. It's very cool. There's a lot of stuff here. So the first thing you can do, and this is how I found it, I wanted to look up an error code. So I put it in Google, came here, I was like, wow, I didn't even know this existed. So look up common error codes, see what the corresponding error messages are, how to resolve it, and then get tips on how to troubleshoot slow running flows, which we learned from Sean, but maybe there's more. And then there's a lot of other stuff. So this is a great place to go if you're having problems with the flow. Or
Oh,
Sean.
we talked about this, so I'm going to hurry up, but don't use your out-of-the-box security roles. You want to copy it and rename them instead because Microsoft pushes updates to them, and they probably have more access than you need. But I'm going to hurry up to one more tip because we're getting to the end. We only have a few minutes, so I want to see the exciting ones. Oh, we talked about this. Set up your own publisher. So you want to do this so that you know what you worked on and so you don't look like a loser. Losers use the default publisher. Professionals create their own. And this is going to control the prefix on the system. It's going to control the value that your option set startup. And you really, all you need is like a name and you're going to set the prefix. It's really easy to set up.
Skip it. We're to talk about it.
We talked about solutions.
They get it. Dataverse Analytics, I think this is worth talking about because it's a little different than what we've done. So this is in the Power Platform Admin Center. So instead of just managing your environment settings and managing your users and granting access, if you go to the analytics area, you're able to see some really cool things here. So we've got the environment admin, the Power Platform admin, the D365 admin, and the M365 global admin are the ones who can come in here and see all of this data and drill down to it. So there are things like who are your active users, what are the most used tables or entities, and how many creates, reads, and deletes are there by each table.
Also, use alternate keys. So when you're setting up Dataverse, we want to ensure that users are not creating duplicate records. So you can use duplicate detection rules, but they're kind of annoying. One way to enforce uniqueness is to set up alternate keys. So you would be unable to add another row with that same alternate key. So one good example or something that I like to use is email, right? On your contact, you definitely don't want emails with contacts with duplicate emails, especially if you're using Portal and they're logging in, right? You could use this for account number, maybe employee ID on an employee or a user record, or some kind of serial number. You could just set up that key. It won't let you set them up if there's already duplicates, so clean it up first.
Set your refresh cadence. You can pick from frequent, moderate. Yeah, next.
Next. Okay, just this has to be our last one.
We have to get to 60.
Oh, okay, yeah. Talk about
use
this.
Power Apps Copilot. Use natural language. Build an app. Yay, Copilot. Go.
Next. One more to 60.
Is this me or you? You.
Oh, we don't want to talk about that.
That's kind of a boring one to end on.
Yeah, you can have form-based security, assigned security roles.
This happened when we were live. We're like, oh, we need a good one.
We don't like it. Do you like this one?
Yeah.
No. Oh, okay. We're gonna run out of time.
Uh-oh.
Oh, is this still real? Yeah. We'll talk about it.
It's your turn.
Oh, you can have AI generated apps. AI generated description of your
Power
apps.
Automate approvals.
Talk about it. So you can do it.
So
and then we'll end.
I think everyone on here is using Power Automate, but if you're not, approvals is kind of like the gateway drug to using Power Automate, I think. Every organization has an approval process. You have probably a semi-manual approval process. If you're starting with Power Automate, this is an awesome place to start. Our first one internally was a peer review blog process. We used to ping people like, hey, can someone read my blog and approve it? Now everything's automated using the approval flow, which is really cool. So 4 different types depending on what you need to do. It's awesome. And I think this is our actual real flow.
The end, right?
Woo!
We're at the end. So 64 tips in 45 minutes. We didn't really talk about it at the beginning, but we have a bank of over 150 tips. So if you've seen us do this presentation before, or if you see us coming up at a future event, we're continually increasing that bank of tips. So it was 150, 160 for this presentation, but we're going to have even more at the next event. And we hope that you'll come out and see us and let us know your tips so that we can keep adding to it.
Right? Yeah, we'll be at Summit if you want to come see us next. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kylie, for coming and presenting. And thank you, everyone, for joining us at the Philadelphia User Group. You're welcome to join us next time on December 12th. Thank you. And farewell all.